Hello and welcome to another episode of Out Zoo. Today I have my good friend Chris Dancy with me in the zoo, and we're going to talk about Google Glass. This is one of the greatest inventions I've seen in a long time, and everybody tells me it's going to change my life, my work life, and everybody else's life. So let's explore it. Welcome back to the zoo, Chris.
Hey, hi Alf. It's great to be back as always, as all your guests do. My favorite guest is probably Hema.
Yeah, I love her. She's great.
I love me some Hema.
Let's jump right into it. Show me what that thing in your face can do. There
So
are apps and there's all kind of cool stuff.
yeah,
What do you see?
I thought we'd try to do something fun today, something I haven't seen done online today, and that's actually demo to the viewers what I see and how glass works. So we're gonna try to do a tech demo with over the internet. So this should be kind of fun, right?
Yeah.
All right. So right now you should be seeing a screen, my iPhone screen, or
That's correct.
it's actually my friend's iPhone screen.
Yeah.
But what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to mirror. This allows me to mirror what I'm seeing in Google Glass. So this is the first device. This is the first application that you interface to Glass with, because you can't really browse applications just yet. You download them via a mobile phone or over the internet, and then you interact with them this way. But one of the things you can do is a screencast, kind of like sharing your screen. So what I'm going to do now is try to share my screen with you. And unfortunately, I know it's tilted, so I'm sorry about that. But this is the home screen in Glass, and I see it horizontal mode. I don't see it like you're seeing it now, tilted. Just imagine this is what you'd see floating above your eye.
Okay.
The
So
Glass.
let me ask you this: Is what we're gonna see on this screen is what you see over your right eye?
It's what I'm seeing as we speak, right? So
Okay.
if I say, "Okay, Glass, take a picture," you'll see it take a picture of me seeing the screen that I'm seeing with you, kind of like a crazy inversion type thing.
I
Or
got you.
yeah, yeah. But this is the home screen for Glass. This is where everyone starts out. It always displays the time and the key phrase. The Glass navigation system is temporal. So if I swipe forward, I see things coming up in the future that I'm going to be doing or that I'm watching or monitoring. And if I swipe backward from the home screen, which is here, I see pictures I've taken, text messages, people I've talked to, emails I've sent, that sort of thing. So it's all very temporal, and then it all starts from the center spot and moves forward or back. So we'll get more into that in a second, but I thought we'd kind of go over just some of the basics.
Yeah.
So you don't need to touch Glass to make it work. You can just talk to it, but I like the gestures myself. So I'm going to show you some of the options that we have. So I'm going to say the key phrase, which is "Okay, Glass," and by tilting my head up and down, you'll see their list of commands I can do. Now, I can't say these commands out loud because I'll just start to do them.
Yeah.
But you can see that I can do phone calls are in there, all sorts of like little programs are in there. It's kind of fun. I can tell it, hey, I need to go someplace, get me. I can't say the words, but I can do those things.
Mm-hmm.
So
This is my dog. If I say the word dinner, he will go
exactly,
crazy.
exactly. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just demonstrate what it's like for me to be at home working.
Okay.
Take a note. Today I'm with Alf on a webinar talking about Google Glass and how wearables will change the future of technology. Yeah, now what will happen is that will actually get sent to Evernote, and then it'll be geotagged with where I was, and I'll be able to see that note in Evernote. And as you can see, there's the note we just took.
Sweet.
Okay, Glass, get directions to McDonald's.
You don't eat at McDonald's.
I don't need a McDonald's.
I do.
Well, I might soon. I'm hungry. So what's great about this is you can be on your bike, you can be anywhere, and you can look for restaurants. You can really look for anything, and it'll just give you directions to that place, and then it'll give you the turn-by-turn directions. And as you can see right now, it's telling me to leave my house and go up Cherry Street, but I can also tell it to change and go by bus, or I can tell it to change and go by car or walk
And do you do that through verbal commands or by touching
Yes,
or?
yes, I could talk to it or I could touch it.
Okay.
So right now it's going to give me mass transit to there. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this off because we don't really need to go to McDonald's right in the middle of this webinar. Some other neat things it does is because of its integration with programs and the internet, it can use big data to actually do things like read other languages. Okay, Glass. Translate this.
And what are we seeing? I can't really. Oh.
Hold on, I'm just going to try to translate that from Spanish to English. Let me move it to a screen where it's not so bright.
That's okay.
So a good example of this would be like if you're looking at a street sign.
Food, la comida.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's saying food in 2 miles. It should. And we're dealing with a couple different technologies here, zooming through.
I like this. This, now I see, because we were in Paris for a while last summer, and even my French couldn't hold up to figure out what some of the menus
it's telling me food in 2 miles. So without me having to read the sign in its native language.
Gotcha.
So that's pretty groovy.
Yeah.
And then of course it's just fun to do things like, okay, Glass, record a video. So now I can actually talk to you and have it record you talking to me.
That's not at all postmodern. You recording the recording of the recording.
Yeah. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop the video. And then go back to our screen share. Some of the things I really like doing are what are called vignettes. So I might want to take a picture of you. Hold on. Okay, Glass. Take a picture. And there's a picture of Alf. Okay, Glass. Google. Let's just send it out for a second. We won't send it out. Let's actually do a Google search first. Okay, Glass. Google. Alf's Zoo.
Sorry, I cannot help you with that request.
It's going to try to look.
But you spelled Alsu wrong, man.
I know. We need to call Google and tell them that they need to get their act together. They don't know the zoo.
It's okay. Siri hasn't spelled my name correctly a single time because I use the voice command all the time when I text.
Okay, Glass. Google. Alf's Zoo.
Oh, here we go.
So we'll see if it gets it better with now that it spelled your name. It did spell your name right the second time.
Yeah.
So there it says your name and it says Alf's Zoo and tells me a little bit about Alf's Zoo.
Right now we have just a black screen, but I think that summarizes my success as a.
So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and capture that for you. And again, the screencasting on this can be sometimes a little bit tricky.
That's okay. No, but we get the idea.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So do we have the screencasting back?
Yeah, now it's back. It's the time and OK Glass command.
Yeah. So now I can go ahead and here I can see there's a picture of you. If I want to, I can zoom forward. I can see there's a search for Alf's Zoo. So all the work that I just did shows up in there. So it's pretty neat. There's lots of fun stuff you can do as far as actually seeing the information. As I described earlier, everything's accessible from a menu that allows you to see the information that you want to add. So if I wanted to see the interface, because there is no traditional interface like we're used to.
So right now we're looking at a bunch of panel.
Right. So they call these cards, and all the information in Google Glass are cards. So it shows me where's my device located right now, and tells me the last time it found it and where it was located. It'll also show me information about who I'm connected to if I wanted to send them messages, send them a text message, because you can make phone calls, and then all the different applications I have connected to my Glass. So as you can see, I've got Google Now to show me information coming up in the future. I connected my Facebook so I can send this. I bike a lot, so I actually connected my biking application so it tracks my rides. We saw Word Lens where it actually showed me stuff in a different language. And there's an entire Glass store. It's called Glassware, where you can actually pick lots of different applications to help you with everyday stuff. One of my favorite apps when I'm traveling is an app called Backpack, Field Trip, and it's not fun when I'm in Denver because I live here. But what's great when I'm out of town is it actually shows me things around me in real time. So I can just look at a building and have it say, "Oh, look, this is this historic building, and this is what it means." So the Glass App Store, or Glassware as we call it, is really robust. It's still early times. There isn't, it's open to developers, but it's not open to the public just yet. But from here I can set up my glass. I can play with it. I can add networks. So just think about what life would be like if you didn't have a mobile phone with a keypad and everything you had to do was through like a third-party interface.
How many apps, by the way, are currently available roughly? Because there was quite a few ones in the beginning. Now there seems to be acceleration in development right now.
Well, there's two types of apps. There's apps that Google says are like official Google apps, and then there are the type of apps that people root their phones and then or their Google Glass, and then once they root their Google Glass, that just means they kind of like jailbreaking your iPhone, if you've ever heard of jailbreaking. And then there's thousands of apps, ones that do all sorts of things that are against the terms of service, like facial recognition.
I wanted to come to that in a second, because Google's saying that we're not going to have facial recognition. It's them saying don't be evil, whatever the rubbish statement they have. So I could walk around in a herd of people, and with this facial recognition thing, I can connect that to Google searches, and every time I see someone, it will recognize the face and information will come up.
Correct.
That's not at all futuristic.
Yeah, I've played with it. It's because I have 4 pairs of Google Glass, so I've played with it on the one pair that I rooted. It's not as quick as it would seem. Like you could just stare at someone and then get information on them. It takes a second, but we have to really slow down for a second and remember that we have computers strapped to our heads looking up information about people over the internet and then bringing that information back to us, and it's moving very fast. So I'm kind of kind to the fact that it's not as good as it should be. Hopefully by the end of the year the software will be better and things like that will be allowed.
Have people been upset with you wearing Google Glass? There have been numerous reports where people are uncomfortable with people wearing glasses around them. Have you run into that?
I've had people at conferences. James Finister, who works for Tata Consultant, he referred to me as a glass hole.
Yes.
So you have people who are less than gracious, less than professional, who say things like that. But I don't think that that's the norm. Most people who use phrases like that are just sensationalist people looking to grab headlines, or not really people who are into bringing people together or inclusiveness. I've been to a concert. I went to the Justin Timberlake concert, and I remember they said to me, "Take them off," and I'm like, "Why?" And they're like, "Well, if you want to record it, use your phone. You can't use Google Glass." So there's a lot of weirdness about, like, they don't mind if you use other devices to do the things, but they don't like you using Google Glass to do it. I've never had anyone like outright say something to me. At South by Southwest last week, I had, there were some young kids that would scream, "Okay, Glass," and then like scream commands at me, like my Glass was gonna understand their voice. But that's just people being silly.
Yeah.
It's new, and it's anything else. Realistically, as we get further into the Zoom, we talk about the implications of this. The novelty will wear off, and I have to remind people all the time. In 2008, when we got iPhones, no one knew what was happening. We just knew that it was something new, and when they added the App Store, no one really understood the implications of why would you want an App Store on a mobile phone. But now we're very sensitive when we see devices. We're like, okay, what is it? What is it going to do? and we're constantly trying to figure it out because we want to be that one step ahead we weren't when, you know, smartphones kind of hit us upside the head.
Yeah. No, I mean, in the 80s, when the first big, you know, phones came out, and it was very much a yuppie teddy, as we call it in Sweden, we make fun of it, but that was pure jealousy. And in Sweden, we own jealousy. It's okay. It's the same thing here. I mean, obviously, everybody wants in on the action, and that. The reason why I asked you that is because it is how it's being sensationalized. Something that causes friction, something that causes disruption, which is exactly what new technology does. I mean, people that own cars back in the days, or people that were the first one who had electricity in their houses, were considered witches almost.
Yeah.
And the same thing's going to happen over and over. It's not like we're evolving, not that we're becoming better people. We're the same cave guys that crawl out of Stone Age times today. But
yeah, I mean, a lot of it's just fear. I mean, I'm okay with that. I mean, heck, I'd be afraid if I saw this much technology happening this fast. But
why is it happening so fast right now? Why am I lucky enough to live in this time?
Well, you'd have to ask your mom and dad. But about your specific date and time, I don't think it's happening as fast as we think it is. I think our perception of velocity is skewed because of the attention that we show to systems that confirm our beliefs that things are fast or slow. You can ask many people who live in the country, you know, how wearable technology or smartphones are affecting their lives, and they have no idea. You know, they don't look, well, what are you talking about? I don't have wearable technology. Same way you can ask someone who's had a smartphone for 5 years, how is it going so fast? They don't even understand what's happened. They just know that their entire lives now is in the palm of their hands. So, you know, I'm one of those people that don't think it's moving that fast. I think what's moving fast is fear, uncertainty, and divisiveness, and I'd like to see that change.
How has technology like that? You're a big proponent, and for those who haven't seen you on the Zoo, you sometimes talk about. We've talked about quantification, we talked about the impact of social media and so on. You quantify a lot of things that you do. You like to document yourself. And if you look at the evolution of the self from, you know, early 1700s till today, so the idea of the self is very new. Is this the Uber self? Is Google Glass an extension of who you are, augmentation of who you are, or does it help cement who you are? Does it move you forward, or does it help you root yourself?
Well, I think those are two kind of different questions. And the concept of identity is very separate than the concept of self. There are two types of data currently that happen in the world of technology today. There's soft data, which most people would associate with social systems. And soft data comes from the constructed self. So what you put online, what you choose to share. I'm sharing my workout today. I'm sharing a picture of my dog and I out at the park, right? So that's very soft data. That's very much tied to a sense of self. Hard data, though, on the other hand, is tied to a sense of identity. I'm sorry, soft data is tied to identity. Hard data is really tied to self. And hard data you can't make up. So wearable computing, things with sensors in them, like the ones on my arm and all over my body and those types of things. Hard data doesn't lie. So you can't construct an identity out of hard data because it is what it is. I mean, now if you're, a yogi or, you meditate, yeah, you can control certain body systems. So you can construct a self from that. But I think the idea of identity and self versus hard data and soft data when we look at technology is really important to consider, especially when you're supporting users or you're building software, right? Because, are you building features and applications that support identity or self, or are they supporting soft data or hard data or a combination of all four? And those are four very radically different things, and you'll find that very successful applications and services actually blend identity and self, hard data and soft data into something homogeneous that's hard to identify. The rise of all these ephemeral apps. I just saw the CEO of Secret at South by Southwest, and he likes to talk about there's something really profound about the idea that unless you're a curated personality, so in a lot of ways, a lot of my social media.
What's that? What would that mean, curated personality?
So a lot of ways, my social media presence is a curated personality, right? It's what people have constructed. It's what I've contributed to it. It's what it's made, whether it's Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn or these zoos that I do with you or podcasts. It's something that's constructed, right? Well, it's hard for people today to break into a curated personality market because attention is so finite. So you see people struggle with, well, why would I even bother getting on Twitter? You know, my work wants me to get on Twitter, and there's no use to it. You know, no one pays attention to me, or you know, why would I even friend someone from work at Facebook? So that's really a curated personality. Whereas an ephemeral app or applications that blur self and identity, those are more about following ideas. So if you look at something like Secret or like Whisper, no one knows who you are when you share something on those networks. But if the idea is powerful enough, the idea itself gets liked. And it's not you being liked because your identity is completely missing from the picture. It's the concept of your idea that's liked. It's like if I post a picture of my dog, so I'll probably get a lot of likes on Facebook. But if I went on Secret and said, I sometimes wish my dog wouldn't bark right in the middle of a meeting, it makes me almost want to get rid of him. That's like people might agree with that, but they would never, like they agree with the ideology, they're not agreeing with the curated personality. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So, but it's easy to say that on one side that could be a tool for trolls to just scream and be nasty. On the other hand, it's also a way for very private people like myself to have my voice heard without having to deal with the connecting with people. I don't necessarily want. I want to share my ideologies and my ideas, but I don't necessarily need to be your best friend. And this gives me a platform to do that.
Correct. It gives you a platform to share the ideas you feel safe sharing.
Because you had on one of your shows, you had is it called Meat Space Canadian?
Yeah. That's a great ephemeral app. Yeah.
Love that, and it's. You're there for a moment, you chit chat with people, and then you disappear. Very much like a bar. If I walk into a bar in New York City, no one's gonna remember me because I don't live in New York City.
And you don't have to be famous to walk into a bar, right? So you don't have to be a curated personality. So you know, I think again, hard data, soft data, identity, and self are very important when we talk about these things. I mean, it's great to talk about wearable technology, and we can dive into some real use cases of kind of where wearable technology is going and what it's done. I've even created some stuff for you if you want to see it.
I'd love to
kind of break it down very simply. But I think ultimately, we have to really deal with the ramifications of how is this changing people, and if we are in the business of being human, how do we interact with people who've been changed through a relationship that rewired them in some ways?
It doesn't. Before we go there, the self and the identity, and this is a long discussion. So we're not going to go into the philosophical part of it. But is that gap between who we want to portray us to be and who we believe ourselves to be, and the reality of ourselves? Is that gap growing, shrinking, or more importantly, are we actually gauging that? Are we finding who we are? Is these tools helping us turn ourselves into small little gods?
Well, I mean, there's definitely media that's in academic research and other sources that say that for all intent and purposes we're living in the cult of a narcissistic society. I think healthy narcissism is very positive, and you actually can't be very narcissistic unless you have a relationship with yourself. So any step toward a journey of personal discovery is important. I think if I go back to my own life, and I can only really reflect on that because I'm not as scholarly as you, but all the representations I had of myself in the 70s and 80s really came from emulation that I had from things off of television, so dressing like I was, in Happy Days or in Flashdance or whatever the show was. And then as my identity grew, I became, in early high school, kids usually fall into these groups, right? And then they identify with the group, and they're not really so much bound by the culture itself. And then somewhere through college, you start to kind of get your own groove, and then it can really be difficult. I think today so much of that when you're not shaped geographically and you're not shaped by media, and you're actually shaped by technological confirmation bias, that's a completely different road, right? So kids today, they identify with non-geographical groups like I did. I lived in a small town, I had a small group of people, and I had this massive group of people on TV I could relate with. Today, kids relate with this global village, and sometimes this global village can be very dark, and sometimes it can be very light, but ultimately they have much more exposure to ideas than I had as a child, because they're getting sources from all over. So I think the idea of a constructed identity or a journey to self today is much different in so much that it can be done in a way that just wasn't capable to us. I mean, if you think about a child from the late 1800s, I mean, his access or her access to books or to people of color, if you were raised in the United States in the Northeast, was very limited. So the idea of who they thought they were, you know, as a personal story, when I moved to Colorado in 1996, I had never met a Hispanic person.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in a little town in Maryland, so I had never met a Hispanic person. When I moved here, I thought it was, I just couldn't believe it. But the other thing I couldn't believe, because I grew up in Maryland, was there were no African Americans in Colorado at that time. There were, like, I met like one person in 3 years. So it's weird how, you know, you put on that filter, but online you see everything, right? You see all sorts of people. So, you know, in some ways I think it's forcing, you know, a very, very scary version of xenophobia that I see in a lot of circles, that just very dark, because these people are, if they don't look and act like me, first, like my skin color or my religion or my belief system, but second, if they don't look and act like me in my technology use, right? So it's a whole nother country that's being discovered, right? It's the haves and have-nots of, you know, the technical elite. And when you're like, well, he doesn't look like me and he doesn't use his tools like me. And we saw early versions of this even in desktop support. You'd look at someone and go, why do you have your desktop arranged that way? You know, why do you put your folders that way? Why do you organize your email that way? And I think, you know, we're always going to be looking for this new land, this new division. But I think technical xenophobia and actual racist xenophobia is very, very real now because of the technological divide.
Okay. So beyond the id and the ego, what are practical usage of these wonderful technologies that you have strapped to your face?
So I've got some interesting use cases to just kind of walk you through, and then if I think these are kind of like open up the door a little bit for where I think the use cases go, and we'll go into that. So do you mind if I just share these with you?
Go right ahead.
All right, so let me go ahead and bring this screen up. So this is part of a presentation that I'm doing in London next week. So let me go ahead and share this.
What's the event?
It's the Wearable Tech Conference.
Cool.
Yeah. So you know, just in terms of like wearables, I mean, where people wear wearables is really important right now. So most of them are being worn on the wrist, head, and torso. You'll see that as you know, as you move down the list, that those numbers change. Interestingly enough, most of the new wearables that are coming through pre-tail, things like Kickstarter and Indiegogo, are finger or hand based, which is kind of flip that chart upside down. And you'll see most of the market focus right now is around lifestyle. And I think a lot of times when you talk about what are some actual uses for wearable computing, there's this idea of, well, you know, how would I use it at work? Do you have the? Are you seeing the slide?
Yes. Yes, very much. Yeah.
So, you know, like when you say lifestyle, you're like, well, that doesn't fit my work. But, you know, as you get further down into it, you know, you'll notice it starts getting closer to what we would call work. So medical, industrial, maybe entertainment. And then the numbers for wearable computing over the next few years are just kind of staggering. And I think it's also important to really consider how possible wearable computing is. So the extensibility of it versus the wearability of it. So, you know, all the way from owning the tech, including the network at the highest level on the left-hand side, all the way out to an implant in your body. So like a tooth cam, right, would be the most impossible use case of this. But a Prism uniform is something that I could have, but that's part of my clothing, that's relatively easy to use. So I think this chart does a really good job of thinking about, the two different axes of wearable computing and how possibly they could interrelate. And I think it's also important to remember that wearable computing is not anything really new. We've had clothing for centuries.
Yeah.
Clothing is technology, but wearable computing, and I consider wearable computing is to be anything with electronics inside it for some time. So diabetics have been dealing with insulin pumps for a decade, pacemakers for much longer. One of the first wearable computing I ever had was a smartwatch. Glasses are wearable computing, hearing aids. Stephen Mann, who's an absolute pioneer, I've had the pleasure of seeing speak. Back in 1995, you'll see that this was his getup, and he was actually streaming everything he saw as he walked down the street to a website. And
this is the first Google. This is the prototype of Google Glass.
Well, some of the concepts, from his MIT team, actually, some of those people actually work over at Google now. But when you consider in 1995, almost 20 years ago, this guy had computers strapped to him and he was streaming. This is not a new concept. People have been thinking about what it would be like to have this type of world. Some everyday uses of wearable computing. We talked about clothing. So, in Disney World, I was really happy to get my name on my hat and wear my hat around. But today, if you go to Disney, you get something called a smart band, which you'll see a copy of my friend's smart bands that were sent that were, had his kids' names on them that tracked what they were doing and allowed them to buy things without actually using any cash or any type of monetary system. It was tied to credit cards. Wait in line for rides, check into things. So, very, very, very disruptive. And then, all the different use cases for wearable computing. So health, obviously, is one we talk about a lot, but I also wear a narrative camera all the time now, which is for life logging, and that snaps a picture every 15 seconds. And what's great about that is I was at a restaurant recently, and I couldn't remember this salsa. They had 6 salsas, and one of them I absolutely loved. And I actually just launched my narrative app and went back to the day that I was there last, found the actual salsa in the menu and showed the lady. She was like, "Oh, you want the salsa verde fire?" And I'm like, "Yep." So, life logging and actually recording everything is really interesting.
Is life logging for us to share with the rest of the world or for us to remember our own lives?
I think it depends on the life logger. For me, I use it for my own life. I don't share, how much information I collect. I don't share a lot of that. I don't share any of it. It's for me to have a relationship with myself to kind of understand and benchmark and get feedback from my life. Assistive technology, everything from haptic shoes to Google Glass, ambient technology, extrasensory wearables are really huge.
What's ambient technology?
So ambient technology is anything that gives you information without actually some type of actual display. So in the case of the device on the screen, that's a piece of jewelry that it has a sensor in it that picks up the electrical signals from your heartbeat. So you wear it as a necklace, and it glows in unison with the rate of your heart.
Why is that important?
Some people like to wear outrageous clothing. Some people like to behave outrageously. Some people like to allow their data or their feelings to show. I think it's interesting, in a world.
Wear your heart on your sleeve.
We literally wear your heart on your sleeve. Yeah, that's exactly it. And then, wearable clothing like the Ring, which is on Kickstarter now, which allows you to just wear a ring on your finger down in the right-hand corner, to gesture-based, to write notes, to turn things on and off. There's a jacket that allows you to control your iPhone by touching it. My headset that I use actually is Bluetooth. So there's lots of use cases for it. I won't really get into imperceptibles because that gets too far, but there's a great history infographic on wearable computing, and this slide deck's out on SlideShare if anyone wants to look at it. Mm-hmm. But I think if you juxtaposition that against what people think about wearable computing, which would be like a human exoskeleton, that's a little bit further in the future, but it also would prevent a lot of real-life problems. So someone who works in a factory, or if you've ever been to the airport and you see those, people behind the counter struggling with heavy bags, exoskeleton, an upper body exoskeleton would really help some of those people and prevent a lot of injuries. So I think there's use cases for all of these things, but we have to think about the human element and why that would be important. I think what most people worry about when we think about wearable computing is surveillance. There's a picture of a police officer here in Denver. He said, "Let me play with the Google Glass." I said, "Only if you let me film you filming me." So that's all the police officers here in Denver wear these little cameras on their chest, There are cameras everywhere in the airport, and of course above us we've got satellites and drones. So we're being watched. But the opposite of that would be life logging, right? So there's me wearing my narrative camera, having lunch with my friend Jose, and then over on the other side of that, there's a wearable device called a capture, recording everything I say and just saving the important clips when I tap it the last 60 seconds of that. So surveillance is bidirectional, and how we use that information, whether it's through law enforcement or governments, or for ourselves and to enrich our own lives, really makes the difference, as you pointed out earlier. And then there's these devices that actually automatically, this was from MIT, basically this was a hack project, but what they wanted to do was they wanted to skim off and show you the information that was being shared without you knowing about it. So this is a device that watches your phone and watches anything that you're connected to and lets other people see what you're doing. So if you're never sure about how much information you're pumping into the atmosphere, there's a little device you can get from this project that you can actually pin to your sweater, and it shows people exactly what you're doing or what you might not be aware that you're giving away. You know, the idea of these datas and these recordings and this information is not anything really new. But I like to consider wearable computing really falls into 4 categories when it comes to the workplace. It's a collection of information. It's a projection of information, so showing that information in a way that's useful to you. It's a reflection of information, so information that helps you be a better person, a feedback loop, and then it's actually the retention and the governance and protection of that information. So in the collection routine, you can think of health apps, identity apps, like life logging, personal information apps, you know, and Mint is a personal information app. You know, using my simple credit card, which is tied to an app on my phone, geotags my purchases, right? And then collecting corporate information, you know, wearables that actually do that. So people who are in a corporation who might need to read a lot of documents, who have eye strain, you know, using assisted optical technology can help them read them faster. One of my favorite things to do is to be in conference calls and actually record the conference call and then go someplace else. And a friend of mine, Matt Barron, shared this the other day, and then just listen to the conference call later at 3 times the speed, you know, to get through it faster. So, you know, the idea of a wearable piece of computing to allow you to consume something faster is really important. You know, projecting information, being able to get it out. And
those are the ski goggles. I need to get myself a. Oh yes, yeah, so I'm in the market for that stuff. I'm telling you.
Yeah, so the ski goggles are great because they show you the conditions of where you are, the how steep the slope is. You know, there's a haptic belt. I've talked about haptic shoes in the past, and then information based on location that triggers actual action. So comm technology. I'm at the office. Show me this. Get me that. Yeah. And then there's reflection. So information, context, reality. And I talked about context at a conference recently, but I put just, I think, some really interesting use cases of wearable technology in context. So LumoBack actually is something that, it's a sensor that you wear on the back of your belt that tells you if you're sitting up straight or walking straight and gives you a little haptic feedback. Another type of wearable would be a neurological context from a neurological wearable. So this is something called a melon, and it actually keeps track of what you pay attention to. So if you're visiting someplace for vacation, it'll show you, hey, you really were focused when you were at this museum, but you weren't really focused here. You know, I think.
How does it do that?
So the neuro headset actually reads the electrical patterns coming from your brain, and you train it to know that when you're focusing on something or when you're not focusing on something. Just like you would train drag and dictate to understand your voice, you train the neurological headset to do that. I've used a lot of neurological headsets. I actually use one to learn. It actually uses electronic stimulation to actually send electricity through your brain so you can learn stuff faster. But in this case, it's just recording the information of what you're doing. But think about the use case of this at work. So if you're, you know, if you have a neurological headset on and when you're working on a project and your attention drifts for a moment, you might have a deadline or something. You've got to get this done in a certain period of time. So just like you would train for a race by running, you know, 5 minutes one day and 30 minutes the next, a neurological headset could maybe help you train to focus more on the tasks at hand. And then there's, of course, genetic context, which there's a company here called Minome, which basically they'll sequence your genome and give you the results, but then in return, they offer you cures for things you're genetically susceptible to. But all this information works together when you have wearable computing using context. So in this case, I've got a day in the life of Chris Dancy. So basically, you can see here, contextually, Google says, hey, I know where you are, and you're not anywhere near the airport. You need to leave. And then as soon as I show up at the airport says, "Hey, you're here. Here's your boarding pass," and it pops up on my phone. And then if I'm at the gate, my phone, because it uses iBeacon, says, "Hey, your gate's been changed. Move." Right? And then when I get to my new destination, it says, "Oh, you're here. By the way, your luggage is on this carousel." And then as soon as you walk outside, it says, "Oh, you're out of the airport. Do you want a car to get you?" Mm. So, all of this displayed through heads up or through a wearable device on your wrist all make work different and usable. What's different, though, is the fact that we don't talk about that this is what work is. Work is about making information and services accessible to people. Ultimately, as we talked about earlier, a lot of this has to do with reality or self. So I just put two examples in here before I end on how I think this is most important. So we've all been to the airport and we've all seen these departure signs that are overfilled with information. But a heads-up display like Google Glass can show you the actual information you need without you having to stare at it. In the middle is an example of the real-life demo we did earlier where you can translate stuff to English. And in the bottom is a really interesting use case that I just did this past Christmas where contextually I knew what I was spending and it knew I was at the mall, so it sent me a reminder to shop less.
Yeah.
The alternative to that is something called diminished reality. So this is where you use a heads-up to this display to actually say, "Hey, I don't like all the things in front of me. Show me something else." So using the world around you as a canvas for what you need to work on. Whether it's a street sign that says you're going the wrong direction instead of something beeping or talking to you, or in the case of the video below, Microsoft's developed technology to remove things or add things to a desktop that you might want to work with. So a lot of interesting stuff when it comes to wearables and the possibilities and implications for the workplace. I think it's really early days, but they're going to be early, fast days for information workers who are having to support these devices, and they go, why can't I see my tickets, updates for my tickets through my wristband or through my headband, or a lot of people are wearing glass now for industrial jobs. There's Virgin Airlines uses them to check people in. There's a roofing company here in Denver that if you're actually doing roofing, it actually tells you, how high you are if you're not level on the roof, how far along in the job you are by scanning the job. I think where we struggle sometimes because we're in IT, to your point about show me the actual use cases, is because we're in white-collar IT work, we go, well, how would I use PowerPoint with Google Glass? Well, you wouldn't. And the problem is you're using PowerPoint. How would I create a Word document? Well, you saw me talk to it earlier, so you could do that, right? But how would you do an Alpha Zoo? Well, you could do an Alpha Zoo with Google Glass. So
hopefully we have done it.
We actually did. I think we did the very first conference through Google Glass.
Yes.
So yeah, it was kind of fun.
And the use cases present themselves, and I think it's a little bit up to each industry to harness that technology and tell us how they're going to use it. I mean, my wife's in the healthcare. When we talked about Google Glass, she said, well, we've had e-medicine for quite a while. And as a newspaper reporter, I wrote about e-medicine in '97.
Yeah.
I thought it was awesome. And this is an extension of it.
And we've had robots doing surgery for a decade.
So it's not super new, but it's now available to it.
No, exactly. It's not super new. It's cheap, and your neighbor can get it, and that's what bothers us, right? Because it's like, wait a minute, everybody's losing their mind today because Google or Amazon announced they were going to up their Prime service by $20, and I thought, my goodness, you can afford to have crap sent to your house in bulk overnight, and you're going to go crazy over $20. It's crazy.
We living up in the remote area, if they start delivering stuff by drone, no one will be happier than us. Not to mention the poor guy have to slush up the hill every time there's snow.
Hey, the next zoo we do, I actually got my first drone. I got a Parrot AR2 a month ago, and actually.
You got a drone now?
Yeah, I have a drone. It's got cameras on it, so I can actually fly it around the yard, or I let it go in the house and watch the dogs and stuff, and yeah.
So you could send it to me technically and film me.
Well, no, it wouldn't make it that. It wouldn't make it that far. But I do want to take it to a conference to have it follow me around.
That's awesome. Well, thank you, Chris. I really appreciate that. I think it was a great education piece on what Google Glass is beyond something that sits on your face. And many of us are scared of because we don't know it. It's xenophobia. It's common. I'll be more surprised if that didn't happen. And I think it's wonderful how you have taken the time to really digest the use cases, the ideas, and how you're pushing it forward, because we need people like you to help us succeed. So thank you, Chris. I appreciate that.
Oh, thank you. And I just want to say thank you again. I think what you do with Zoo is so important for everyone who watches the zoo, for people to understand that they can be creators and they can be in charge of their own lives, and for some of the topics you take on just so boldly, and the fact that you bring such an academic slant to it, and you're unabashedly unafraid to be skeptical and to share your views, and it's so refreshing. And whatever the future holds, Al, it's been an absolute pleasure working with you and doing these things.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. We will have you back in the zoo soon again.
With my drone!
With your drone! I can't wait. The rest of you, take care. Be safe. Bye-bye.